The no trespassing signs felt like a personal insult, plastered across the gates of Wild Heart Sanctuary, the wildlife rehabilitation center I'd spent 10 years building. Behind them, bulldozers sat ready to tear apart 500 acres of carefully preserved habitat. Ms. Rivers, one of our volunteers, Katie, approached with tears in her eyes. The transport team is ready. We need to start moving the animals. I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. Start with the critical care cases. The new facility in Vermont can take our most vulnerable residents first. My name is Alexandra Rivers, and at 32, I'd just been forced to evacuate the largest wildlife rehabilitation center in the Northeast. The sanctuary I'd built from nothing into a groundbreaking research facility was about to become another luxury resort development, courtesy of my uncle, Governor James Rivers. The irony wasn't lost on me. The Mann campaign on environmental protection had just seized protected land through eminent domain. But then Uncle James had always been good at saying one thing and doing another. Alex, Dr. Marcus Chen, our head veterinarian, jogged up clutching his tablet. We need to talk about the research data, specifically the gray wolf study. I glanced around before pulling him aside. Is it secured? He nodded. Everything's encrypted and backed up off-site. But Alex, what we've documented here, it changes everything we thought we knew about pack behavior and ecological impact. I know, I said quietly. That's exactly why we need to protect it. Uncle James can take the land, but he can't take our research. 3 years ago, we'd started tracking an unusual pattern in the local wolf population. What we discovered had implications far beyond our small sanctuary. Implications that could change environmental policy across the country. Implications that would be very inconvenient for certain development projects my uncle had planned. Later that evening, I sat in my small office, soon to be demolished, reviewing years of carefully documented research. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Laura, Uncle James's daughter. Dad's giving a press conference tomorrow of the exciting new economic development. Please tell me you have a plan. I did have a plan, but first, I had to get through the most difficult part, evacuating the animals who'd called Wild Heart home. The next morning, I watched the local news from the sanctuary's makeshift command center as Uncle James stood at his podium, perfectly groomed and radiating authority. This project represents a vital economic opportunity for our state, he announced, gesturing to architectural renderings of the proposed resort. While we respect the work of Wild Heart Sanctuary, we must balance environmental concerns with progress. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom. I let it go to voicemail. She'd been trying to play peacemaker ever since James announced the land seizure, suggesting I take a position with the family's real estate development company instead. Alex, Katie called from the doorway. The news crews are here. They want a statement. I smoothed down my well-worn field jacket and stepped outside. Cameras turned to focus on me as reporters shouted questions. Ms. Rivers, how do you respond to claims that the sanctuary was financially unsustainable? Is this a family dispute? What will happen to the animals? I held up a hand for quiet. Wild Heart Sanctuary has been more than just a rehabilitation center. For 10 years, we've conducted groundbreaking research on wildlife behavior and ecological systems. Research that has implications far beyond these 500 acres. Research funded by private environmental groups. A voice called out, one of Uncle James's PR people, right on cue. Groups with a clear political agenda. I smiled. Our research has been peer-reviewed and validated by multiple universities, but you don't have to take my word for it. Tomorrow, we'll be releasing our complete findings on wolf pack dynamics and their impact on local ecosystems. Findings that directly contradict certain environmental impact statements recently submitted to the state. That got their attention. Uncle James had rushed the resort's environmental review through his appointees at the State Environmental Agency. If our research proved their assessment was flawed. My phone buzzed again, this time with a text from James himself. My office. Now, the governor's office hadn't changed since I was a kid, visiting my uncle at work. Same imposing desk, same view of the state capitol, same sense that every decision made here was final. What game are you playing, Alex? James didn't bother with pleasantries. No game, I replied, taking a seat without waiting for an invitation. Just planning to publish our research. That's what scientists do, share their findings. These development projects are vital to the state's economy, he said, leaning forward. I won't let your bleeding heart environmentalism stand in the way of progress. Interesting choice of words, I noted, considering your own environmental campaign promises. His face hardened. I've tried to be patient, Alex. Offered you alternatives. But you're just like your father, too idealistic to see the bigger picture. My father, his younger brother, had died defending these same forests from development 20 years ago. A hiking accident that had never been fully explained. Oh, I see the bigger picture, I said quietly. I see a man who built his political career on environmental promises he never intended to keep, who uses his power to benefit developers who fund his campaigns, who thinks he can bully anyone who stands in his way. Careful, he warned. You're not just fighting me anymore. The state has approved these projects. The contracts are signed. I stood up, pulling a USB drive from my pocket and placing it on his desk. You might want to review our research before those contracts are finalized, particularly the parts about how wolf pack territories impact the entire ecosystem. The parts that prove your environmental impact statements were, let's say, incomplete. Are you threatening me? Not at all, I smiled. Just sharing scientific data. That's still legal, isn't it? Even in this state. As I walked out, he called after me. This isn't over, Alex. You can't win against the whole system. Watch me, I murmur under my breath. Back at the sanctuary, evacuation was in full swing. Our resident animals, those that couldn't be released back into the wild, were being carefully transported to partner facilities across the country. Marcus met me at the medical building, his face grave. They're trying to access our research servers. Multiple attempts from state IP addresses. Let them try, I said. The real data is safe. What they find is exactly what we want them to see, for now. What Uncle James didn't know was that we'd been preparing for this for months. Every piece of data, every observation, every breakthrough had been carefully documented and verified by independent researchers. More importantly, we discovered something in our wolf study that would change the entire conversation about land development in the region. We just had to play it perfectly. The morning our research was scheduled to be released, I arrived at the sanctuary to find state police blocking the entrance. Sorry, Ms. Rivers, Officer Martinez said apologetically. Governor's orders. The property is now under state control. I nodded, having expected this. That's fine. Everything we need is already secured. My phone buzzed. A message from Laura. Dad's called an emergency meeting with his development team. He looks worried. Good, he should be. At exactly 9 a.m., our research went public, not through state channels or local media, but simultaneously through 3 major environmental science journals and the National Wildlife Federation. Groundbreaking study reveals critical wolf ecosystem link. Wild Heart Sanctuary research challenges development paradigm. New data shows protected habitats more vital than previously thought. The headlines rolled in as our years of meticulous research hit the scientific community. But the real bombshell wasn't in the headlines. Alex, Marcus called, watching the coverage on his laptop. They found it. I leaned over his shoulder to watch as environmental reporters began focusing on one specific aspect of our findings. The discovery of a previously unknown pattern of wolf migration that proved the entire region was a crucial wildlife corridor. A corridor that ran right through Uncle James's planned development sites. My phone rang. A Washington, D.C. number. Ms. Rivers, this is Senator Collins from the Environmental Committee. We'd like you to testify about your findings. The next few hours were chaos. Environmental groups began filing emergency injunctions against the development projects. Scientific organizations released statements supporting our research. And Uncle James, what have you done? He demanded, storming into the small office space we'd rented in town. Do you have any idea how many millions in contracts you've just endangered? Interesting that you're worried about contracts, I replied calmly, and not about the environmental impact our research revealed. This is revenge, isn't it? He snarled. For the sanctuary? No, Uncle James. This is science. The fact that it exposes your corruption is just a bonus. His face reddened. You think you've won. I still control the state environmental agency. They'll discredit your research. They can try, I said. But we've had 3 independent universities verify our findings, and I paused for effect. The FBI is very interested in how certain environmental impact statements got approved despite contradicting available data. That hit home. James had pushed those approvals through personally, overriding concerns from his own environmental scientists. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I'm family." So was my father. The implications hung heavy in the air. 20 years of questions about my father's death, about the development deals that had followed, about the political rise of James Rivers. "The FBI has our complete research archives," I continued, "including some interesting correlations between wolf pack territories in the 90s and certain accidents that happened around development sites." James sank into a chair, his arrogance finally cracking. "What do you want?" "Resign. Kill the development projects, and turn over everything you know about what really happened to my father." "You're destroying everything I've built," he said quietly. "No," I corrected him. "I'm protecting what actually matters." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Our research became the centerpiece of a national conversation about wildlife conservation and development. The state environmental agency underwent a federal audit, and James resigned, citing health concerns, though the ongoing FBI investigation probably had more to do with it. 3 months later, I stood at the gates of Wild Heart Sanctuary again. Only this time, the no trespassing signs were gone. The federal government had designated the entire region a protected wildlife corridor, with our sanctuary as its centerpiece. "Dr. Rivers?" Katie called out. She'd stuck with us through everything. "The first transport of animals is arriving. We're ready to bring them home." I watched as our residents returned, the wolves, bears, and other wildlife that had made Wild Heart their home. Each one represented a victory not just for our sanctuary, but for the principle that science and truth could still triumph over political power. Laura visited a week after we reopened. "Dad's cooperating with the investigation," she told me. "He's finally talking about what happened to your father." I nodded, watching a pack of wolves in their enclosure, descendants of the same wolves my father had fought to protect. Sometimes the truth takes time, but it always finds its way out. A year after Uncle James tried to destroy Wild Heart, we'd expanded our research program to include 3 more sanctuaries across the state. The wolf study that had started it all became required reading in environmental science programs. More importantly, we'd proven that careful observation and documentation could be more powerful than political influence. That science could stand up to corruption. That protecting our natural world was worth fighting for. The old governor's mansion, James's pride and joy, was turned into an environmental education center. Sometimes I catch him washing our sanctuary's public wetlands, seeing the wolves he tried to displace thriving in their protected habitat. I kept his resignation letter framed in my office, next to my father's old research journals. A reminder that power built on lies will always be vulnerable to simple, documented truth. Because in the end, nature doesn't care about political connections or development contracts. It only cares about survival, about balance, about the intricate web of life that connects us all. And sometimes protecting that web requires not just scientific knowledge, but the courage to use it.